Hello and welcome back to Property Matters on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Talon. You can contact us on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. First up today, I'm joined by Ivan Gaine, Managing Director of Sherry FitzGerald New Homes and newly appointed Chair of Industry Representative Body Property Industry Ireland. Ivan, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Carol. Yeah, delighted to speak with you.
So if you weren't busy enough being the managing director of Sherry FitzGerald New Homes, you've now taken on the chair at PII. So obviously a glutton for punishment at this time in the housing market.
And yeah, with three small kids, I think my key to success is collaboration and delegation. Lots of good support, both here and at home. Yeah, no, thank you very much for the introduction. I suppose to introduce Property Industry Ireland. As you've said, it's a cross-disciplined industry representative body. It forms part of IBEC, along with I think 39 other trade organisations and different things. And I'm looking forward to getting involved in the National Council, and I suppose seeing how property inflects with Retail Ireland and all of the other different bodies within IBEC. We work with the other representative bodies as well, particularly the Society Chartered Surveyors as surveyors and as per the day job. It really is a fantastic organization given its breadth and depth of experience. We have four key committees: the Supply and Demand Committee, looking at both housing need and property need. So it's not Housing Industry Ireland; it is Property Industry Ireland. We have a finance committee, obviously looking at development cycles and consumer financing. We have a construction innovation committee, and we have a planning and development committee. So we've had some great successes over the last sort of decade or so. Some of which would include sort of the fast track planning, which started well, is sadly finishing with obviously the sort of judicial review piece, and perhaps tweaks rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater would have been sufficient. We were also very involved in consultation and origination of sort of the ideas around shared equity, and would have had interactions with Homes England. And I'd say it's the great bit is around the different expertise. So from principal developers, from funders, from planners, to the tax advisors, to agents, surveyors, economists. It's really that broad church that we really enjoy and find really beneficial. So it's daunting, but exciting. I think when it was muted towards the end of last year, I thought we were coming out of COVID, and we had housing for all, and there was a bit of energy and pep in the step. But taking it on the last fortnight, the horizon is a little bit more challenging for sure. So I think that need for engagement, collaboration, and urgency is as critical as I've seen it in the last more than 2 decades.
It's interesting when you reflect on what's happening now and then look back over the last 2 decades. It feels like we lunge from crisis to crisis across the property industry, but particularly across housing. And the last 2 years, I suppose, last 3 years even, we were getting to a stage where after the crash, the market looked like it was on the right track. Then you're hit with Brexit, COVID, and obviously now with the war in Ukraine, that actually across all facets that feed into delivery across the property industry, all are impacted. News is being dominated at the moment by construction costs. Our planning weekly is in the media described as broken, and we know that there's a need to digitize, but it goes so far beyond that. When you bring a group of experts together, Ivan, how hopeful are people that actually we can make progress? Because I've been in this industry almost 2 decades. I can't remember a messier time, and I'm saying that having survived 2009 to 2011. I can't remember a more complex time where it felt like we were further and further from a solution.
Yeah, I think we're always hopeful. I think it's, as Napoleon said, a leader is a dealer in hope. But it's I think what's different now to the global financial crash. Obviously it was very adversarial then, And, whilst the media might portray public versus private, as I say, that spirit of collaboration, that engagement, and that willingness to participate and share data and share information is much, much better. There's much greater transparency, be that through the PLCs or through the work the society do in terms of that evidence base on costs, etc. So, it's not a housing market, it's a housing system. And, changing that system takes time. So I think, genuinely that spirit of collaboration is the best I've seen in 20 plus years. It's not just PII, it is across all of the other bodies as well. And, there's really good people in the housing agency, there's really good people in the department, and they have a huge amount to output. I think that's what will get us through. You look at the Scandinavian countries, you look across Europe, the public-private participation works. There's trust there, and there's engagement. And I think in the last number of years, that has definitely improved, be that through Rebuilding Ireland, be it now through Housing for All. So, I think having that interaction and that communication and collaboration, as I keep saying, is absolutely critical. And, I think, as I say, the likes of shared equity will help, a large cohort of buyers. It's later than we would have liked to see. It was announced, probably the guts of 18 months ago now, but it will hopefully launch into this later this month, into June. And that will have a big impact for people and, hopefully assist single buyers. And I think it's going to be bigger in scale than it had been originally anticipated. So, Housing for All was launched last year. It's kind of completed its 6-month cycle. It's 6 months old. It's going to take time. Clearly, there's a lot of industry frustration around, the pace of those different initiatives coming through. But you got to say there is progress. But there needs to be a more critical progress now in light of the terrible situation in Ukraine. And I suppose when I was asked to take on PII, I thought, Housing for All is out, COVID's over, it'll be kind of fine for a couple of years. But as you say, it is at an extraordinarily messy time. And I suppose the risk sharing in terms of the viability and that understanding of viability, and that transparency on the maths is really, really important.
Ivan, I appreciate that you wear two hats, and I'm conscious of that. But I need to ask, in your opinion, is Housing for All the right vehicle for delivery?
Well, I think it's a bit of a case of let's not let perfect get in the way of better. There are some really strong initiatives in it that can be impactful. We just haven't seen the detail of those being released. So addressing judicial review, the establishment of the courts, the changes of the planning bills, etc., are fundamentally required. So there's things that can be done sooner and things that can be done later. But I think there are some good soundings. I mean, just at a base level, the fact that it sets out annual targets by tenure across all of the different areas of rental, of social housing, of private housing, that's actually an achievement, just to have that stepped target by tenure per annum. No other plan even did that. So we had, again, the divisive narrative of rental and people referring to birds of all colors and creed, etc. And it was very adversarial in terms of the language, whereas at least Housing for All is ampersand, it's this, that, and this, that, and the other. I suppose it's the emphasis initially is on public housing, but more will come through, I think, in terms of support of private housing. We're waiting to see some of the detail on Creek Quinaha, which is the subvention for delivery of owner-occupier apartments, which again, theoretically is a really good initiative. So if Creek Quinaha is established with the shared equity product, that will make apartments affordable for people. And as I say, I think there's more work to be done in terms of comparing the affordability or the viability and the construction costs in Ireland compared to other jurisdictions. And I know some of that work is beginning to happen as well. I mean, one of the easy things to when you think about it is we talk about houses and apartments, and there's big debate on density and height, but they're not the same thing. And I think we've had lots of variations on apartment guidelines, be that the introduction of build to rent and changes in sizes and dual aspect requirements and everything else. but we've had very little change to housing guidelines. Housing, as in traditional owned or housing, can be delivered at 35 and 40 hectare and more by reducing some of the minimum and maximum standards. So we had public open space at 10%. If we reduce the 22-meter distances on back-to-back houses and reduce minimum garden sizes, you can achieve a much more viable mix of homes, which would serve lots of communities, towns and villages in a much better way. And that's a change in guidance, not a change in legislation. So I think that's something that we're going to see socialize more fully, and we need to get on and make those decisions. So that's certainly a strand of work that's been worked within PII, and I think is going to be important. It'll take a couple of years to come through.
Why do you think that hasn't been done? Because when it comes to apartment guidelines, as you pointed out, we've certainly had more recent guidelines. There's been changes around them. Housing, not so much. Why do you think that is? And do you think that that's feeding into the dominance that we're seeing of apartments?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I don't know the answer as to how it hasn't happened. We've been talking about it for quite a few years. To be fair to the previous minister, he talked around the Cambridge topographies and some of those new ways of doing it. This isn't even that. This isn't getting into interlocking duplexes or anything else. This is traditional housing with smaller gardens, but with much more greater quality spaces rather than not. And maybe industry collectively hadn't kind of figured it all out. And there's been industry responds and reacts to policy. We try and inform policy, but there's been different iterations, and I say obviously COVID and other sort of scenarios, and probably a lack of awareness of the legacy of older permissions that were being washed out and developed through the system, and probably not that full awareness and consciousness. So I think it's much better understood now, and I think it's something that I say could be quite transformational, albeit it'll take a couple of years once the guidance comes through, to have that coming on board.
Ivan, do you think either with your Sherry FitzGerald or with your Property Industry Ireland hat on, do you think that Housing for All can outlive the current government and actually live to fulfill its mission as such?
Yeah, I mean, look, as I say, I think the fact we have a plan, the fact we have a breakdown by tenure, there is a lot to happen yet within it. I hope it does. I say it's not perfect, but what we don't want is changing policy consistently, constantly. A new government, a new plan, another 6, 9, 12 months of consideration. No, I think the role of the Housing Commission being kind of, potentially that kind of overarching view in terms of where it's at. But I mean, look, we're starting at the wrong point. I think there's probably a consensus on the census is undercooked. So, it's not ambitious enough in terms of the gross numbers. So an average of 33,000 should be more ambitious. And I think, the census results later in the year will probably show we've a much larger population, excluding the Ukrainian situation coming through. So I think the thrust of it, in terms of planning reform, in terms of viability, that awareness on cost around that breakdown by tenure is correct and appropriate. But I think it needs more ambition, it needs more urgency, and it needs bigger targets. I don't think there's that kind of awareness in terms of the exodus and depletion of rental stock. Despite the emergence of PRS, year on year, we're seeing a massive contraction in terms of rental supply. If you were a private owner and landlord, you are getting out, and I suppose values have recovered, so people are out of negative equity and getting out of what is not a great investment currently. So again, if there was changes in tax, that would at least stabilize and stop that exodus. But we need that 150,000 new homes to come through. With the legislation and regulation as it is, we'll have apartments to rent and no houses, because the domestic investor is not participating in the housing market, and the wholesale investor pension funds are effectively precluded through the stamp duty. So if it keeps going as it's going, and I say the plan, a lot of it's good, but right now we're looking at apartments to rent, houses for sale, and never the two intertwine or mix, and we're not creating homes for the general life cycle.
Ivan, there's so much and what you've said there that I need to unpack. So I'm actually going to almost start backwards there. I mean, you mentioned at the start of this that you felt this current plan felt less adversarial, whereas I'm looking at it and I can only see every element of the housing sector becoming more adversarial. Whether because you're absolutely right. It is pitted kind of, you've got public versus private, you've got developers versus community, and it's such a nonsense. When we look at how successful places and placemaking has always been delivered, it has been the developers and the home builders as part of the community, building the community. These are proud professionals that actually have a legacy and want to create a legacy of excellence. It's one thing that we've seen, and Dublin has such a rich history of it. And I agree that maybe that reputation was tarnished, in past decades. But to suggest that the private sector and the community can't work together, that's such a nonsense, because we know that's the only way it's ever worked really, really well. But in terms of the adversarial nature, what we're seeing in particularly this year, and we're seeing it through the high levels of vacancy and dereliction as well. As you mentioned, the domestic investors have left the market. And we're alienating the investors who want to come here, because again, even though we label them as institutional investors, they're still made up of private individuals who are choosing to put their money in these funds. So actually, at their core, they're all individual investors. So actually, reputation matters, certainty of policy matters. And in Ireland, we seem to, you touched on new government, new plan, but actually, we haven't had a housing policy that outlives any government ever so far in Ireland. And our next governmental change is likely to be more radical than what we've seen in the past. It is unlikely that a plan today is going to carry forward. So our great white hope is really the Housing Commission. Do we feel that will that be strong enough? Will it be like Bord Fáilte? Will it be like Bord Bia? Will it have that kind of will it have the gravitas to be able to withstand any political pressures and any political cycles?
Yeah, I mean, again, maybe kind of be like the IDA and make a success of it. So, yeah, I mean, look, it's you talk about the PRS and the institutional investment, and people give out about the quantum. We should be attracting twice that investment. At least twice that investment. We've a mortgage market hovering around 10 or 11 billion. If you do the maths, and we've a subsidized secondhand market. We should be transacting a lot more secondhand stock. We probably need capital flows per annum of about 30 billion. So we've 10 billion of mortgages. We've about 4 billion coming from the state. We've maybe 2.8 billion into residential investments, albeit a chunk of that is in standing stock. It's not new delivery. And whilst we record it in terms of the investment agents as it being a transaction, it's typically a deal agreed with stock coming in 18 or 24 months time. You have a good portion of cash investors. So there's about a 10 to 12 billion capital money gap, if you like. So, we need the mortgage market to grow to 16, 17 billion. We need institutional pension funds to double their activity, and we need to stimulate that activity, because otherwise the burden falls back to the state. And, that's not good for society. It's not good for Ireland. And I think, that is the reality of where it's at. And I say, it's simply do the math. And, you think of 30 billion per annum, there was 40 billion mortgages back in the heyday. So to aspire to that and have a target for that sort of mix, and that's only using the housing for all kind of targets, it actually should be, maybe closer to 35 or 40 billion. So there's room for all actors, all stakeholders, but we should be stimulating that investment for the public and for the public good. And as I say, it's a big challenge.
Well, okay, but even taking one of those, which is the need for greater levels of capital coming into Ireland, how can we invite capital in when there is a state policy of name calling, which sounds so petty, but actually that's what we're down to. But also, inconsistent policy making. Money needs certainty.
Yeah, I think the government are aware of that, and I think you might have commented that housing for all is divisive or adversarial. the reporting of it is adversarial. The engagement and what we see in terms of the endeavor, both in the private and public side, is not adversarial. It's very supportive, and there's genuinely, shoulder to shoulder type engagement. But the soundbite, the noise around all and everything, and how it's wholly politicized for political gain, is the issue. It's not on, actually the stakeholders. The stakeholders on all sides want to roll up their sleeves, want to figure it out. There's some very smart people around a lot of the industries, which I rely on, not including myself within it. And there is that endeavor, but it's how it's reported. And that's why, to talk to you today is important, because it's around communicating the challenges within the system and say it's not market forces alone, it's systemic challenges and issues that need refinement. It's planning, it's infrastructure, it's lack of investment over a very, very long time. And, we need to be more supportive. It's like the Irish soccer team a few years ago were deplored, and then it changes, and it's kind of, you get behind them again. So we got to kind of get behind the plan. The plan is not perfect, but it's a pretty good plan. It's a good starting point. It can vary over time, but I suppose what we don't need is, as you say, to stimulate that investment, to have certainty and consistency. We don't need root and branch changes all the time. We do need to get some fundamentals right around planning and land. We could go in, open up the whole kind of VAT sort of scenario, but I think that's probably improbable. But, I think there's probably an attitude to any problem. If you think you can't fix it, you won't. But I think there is an urgency now in terms of what's happening globally, that we shouldn't waste the crisis.
Yeah, no, and do you know what? Actually, I'm glad that you framed it as that we shouldn't waste a crisis, because actually, I believe that after the crash, we wasted so many opportunities to reform and get things right. But let's take it down to just your day job level. Across new homes, people coming in, first time buyers, people trading up and down. How are they responding to the marketplace at the moment?
It's incredibly challenging. I'm the eldest of three, and I've a couple of siblings who are renting and having a torrid time, and surely Ivan can do something. No, I can't. So like it is incredibly challenging for buyers. Within my own team, we talk about empathy a lot, not for the people who got the houses, but for those who are unsuccessful. So, we're clearly massively oversubscribed by, multiples of 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it's really, really tough for people. So, the answer is supply, and the answer is on greater certainty in planning. We have good schemes coming on, but we're working on them a very long time. So we have more stock coming on in H2 and more developments commencing. Some of them were very delayed in the last few years. So it's almost like we've little pockets of kind of pent up supply, but it's tiny in relative terms. Mm-hmm. And, we've just completed our research report published yesterday. But if you compare the new homes individual sales from last year to 2019, so just skip 2020, it's down nearly 20%. So, that quantum for sale is, in around 8,000 units for sale across the country. So it's really, really challenging for buyers. I think, the communication, again, in terms of what shared equity is, that awareness, how that translates, it's complex, for people in industry in terms of, okay, in year 5, it does this, is it 20%, is it 30%? It won't be limited to first time buyers only, which is a positive. It's more open to that. It is limited to new homes in terms of additional stock, but it's a really tough market for people. And within the market, there's all sorts of different markets. So we're seeing, more migration both into the country and around the country. So, regional Ireland is performing extremely well. And that's where a lot of the price appreciation is. I think Dunmore East is the hottest market and the most sunny place in the country. It's not Dublin driving it. It's the border in the southeast. So this is, it's a national scenario. And, again, looking at our stats, if we look at the for sale availability, it's down 30% compared to the same period in 2019. So we've that really, really finite supply, both within new and second hand, and just insufficient mobility. And I think probably we hold on to our houses for too long. So is the average 39 years or something. So we should be trading up, trading down. There should be more choice. There should be greater mobility. All of those factors are tough. So it's as I say, hearing it firsthand from my brothers and sisters, it brings it home. Even though we're dealing with it every day, sometimes you need to kind of have it completely firsthand, and it affects every household, and it's really tough. And so that's where we have that absolute urgency now to pick up that pace that you mentioned pre-COVID. There was a trajectory. The viability piece is a different thing. If there was certainty on the sector, on the throughput in the market, industry will respond with modern methods of construction. Again, it's quickening up the pace in terms of new ways of delivering. And there's CLT, cross-laminated timber buildings of huge height coming up around the world. We can't get there as yet. So I think we need to be brave. We need to be ambitious. And we need to get at it quickly.
Okay, very good. And final question, Ivan, because of course I'm conscious of time, but for first-time buyers coming in through your doors today, what advice are your team giving?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's to be really well prepared. Clearly and obviously think about your location. Think about what concessions you're going to make. It is really tough. And you do need to move early. I mean, we kind of, the most transparent way is kind of first up, best dress, and it is a competitive marketplace out there. Watch for the initiatives, watch for shared equity. But it's going to take, it could take 10, 11, 12 months by the time you secure that property. It is a long search. But for people who are forced into a rental accommodation, they're going to be buying their property for probably 50% of what their outgoings are. Nearly every project sort of equates to that. But I would say try and remain hopeful, and it's hopefully it's all worth it in the end, and together we can do it.
Okay, no, that's a good hopeful note to finish on, Ivan. Thank you so much. That was Ivan Gaine, Managing Director of Sherry FitzGerald New Homes and newly appointed Chair of industry representative body, Property Industry Ireland. We need to take a quick break now. Stay tuned.